What's up, y'all? In this video, I go over my full workflow on the Dirtywave M8. This includes chopping and sequencing a sample, building the rhythm section, adding additional melodic layers, and doing some final mixdown and arranging stuff. It's pretty similar to what you might expect from one of my live streams, but I tried to keep the session a bit more focused and explain some of the decisions I was making along the way. So let's get started. So before getting into any sequencing, you'll see that I have these 8 chains set up on the song page, and this is part of a template I have that helps organize the phrases that I use for each chain. So they each start with the same number as the track number. So track 7 has 7-0, track 8 has 8-0, etc. So let's get started. I usually begin with a melodic sample. Once I've got that loaded up, I go to the sample edit screen, and then here I can do the chopping. So I'll use the lazy chop function. You have to highlight the slice marker parameter, and then you hold play and you tap edit, and it inputs slice markers. All right, and then let's see if I did all those right. So yeah, I usually have to clean them up a little bit. And this sample has a rhythm section that you can hear. So whenever you hear the kick and the snare, that's basically where I'm looking to put the slice markers. And a good way to tell if you need to adjust the slice marker start or end point is if you play the slice and you hear that kind of like click at the end, or sometimes it sounds like a sucking sound or pop. So that means that the next slice needs to be pulled back a little bit. So see, it's gone now. Like this one needs to be pulled back too. Yeah, you can see that transient, that's the kick drum. That's another one where it's like... You can hear the snare at the end of this one, so I gotta pull it back. And then I generally play through the slices one last time just to kind of listen and see if anything sounds off. So once that's done, you have to overwrite, which will embed the slice markers in the file. And then from here, I can just back out. With the slice set to file 01, now I can input notes in the phrase that will play the slices, starting in C1. And so usually I just put some notes down in the phrase to have a sequence that can play, and then from there I adjust the pitch and the tempo to match what I'm looking for. So really any notes will do, but I try to find ones that sound a little interesting. Right now I've got it set at 90 BPM, and you can tell that the sample is playing too quickly because there's gaps and silence after each slice plays. So I either need to bring the tempo up, which I don't want to do, or I can bring the pitch down. And so the detune parameter is pretty good for adjusting the pitch. This has a range of, I think it's 8 semitones. If I want to adjust the tempo, I might need to continue to adjust the pitch as well. I think the pitch and the tempo sound fine. So next what I can do is start adding elements of the rhythm section. So once I have the sample selected, that's when I like to start trying to add different one-shot drums. And then with most of the drums, I usually put an envelope on them to gate the release a little bit. And then I like to mess around with the pitch as well to see if something sounds a little bit more in tune with the sample. And then the degrade can give an interesting kind of lo-fi effect to it, so it's always worth trying. Alright, it's a little too lo-fi. It works better with certain sounds like the hi-hat, for instance. So let's try doing a kick drum next. And then there's generally some sound design stuff I do on the kick drum, so we could do the same envelope. Okay, so yeah, I've got the envelope on the kick drum, and then I like to do the EQ as well and give it a nice like bass boost. Yeah, and I usually keep these settings pretty similar, like the bell for the mids, bring the mids down a little bit. And then I like using the high cut because it gives you like a little bit of the high end, but not too much, depending on what you set the frequency to. And then we could bring the pitch down as well. All right, let's do hi-hat next. And then I'll use the quick fill shortcut. So you have to hold shift and then press option twice, and then hold option and press left. And then that'll add notes to the phrase. And then I put all those notes there because I want to adjust the envelope, and you have to have notes in the phrase to be able to hear it as you're adjusting the envelope. So yeah, this hi-hat, it had some kind of noise at the end of it. But if you do the hold to 1 tick, and then you just set the decay, you can really control the release of it and make it sound a lot tighter. So yeah, it's a little quiet, so it's hard to tell the difference between these, but yeah, it kind of just like warms it up a little bit and gets rid of some of the high ends, which can give you a nice like lo-fi sound. You can also get that effect by decreasing the pitch. I think I like it better at degrade 03. So usually once I've got the basic kit assembled, so we've got the kick, the hi-hat, and the snare, this is when I start doing microtiming, and I usually start with the hi-hat. So with the hi-hat, generally I'll just put an MTT command down. So the MTT command is useful because it allows you to adjust the timing of the notes by microticks, which is a subdivision of a regular tick. So there's 6 ticks per step by default, and then this allows you to adjust things even further. So each microtick corresponds to 1/8 of a regular tick. And so yeah, usually what I do is I just copy 1 with an empty row under it, and then you can shift edit and paste it. And then from here, so I'll press play, and then basically I just add note values to this command, listen to what it sounds like. So 1/1 sounds pretty good. And then I have a couple that are just like a little bit off. In fact, maybe I'll bring it in a little bit more. So as I increase the value, it's basically pushing those notes back and delaying their triggering. And then when I bring the value down, it's bringing the notes closer to where they would land on the grid, basically. And you can do this with the kick as well. It's very nice for that like double kick boom bap type pattern. So with the kick phrase, I'll just take one phrase and I'll add a lot of kick notes to it. And then you can use the nth command to have certain notes trigger on certain times that the phrase plays through. So for example, 1-0 means that it triggers on 2, which is the second time the phrase plays through, or you could do 8-0, which is 1 and 3. So that's a way to have it show up on like kind of the odd numbered phrases. The other thing that you need to do for this to work is you need to have multiple phrases in the chain. So right now I only have one phrase, so I'm going to put 3 more, so there's 4 total, and that'll make it so that I can use the up to 3 and 4 command basically. And this works really well with the ghost notes, the ones that are kind of like off the grid a little bit, like this one, which comes right before the snare. And then this one as well, which comes after the snare. And you could probably do it on some other notes too, but I generally just do it on those ghost notes. So now I just need to figure out if I want this one on the 2, and then whatever I pick for 1, I'll just have the other one be the opposite. So let's see what this sounds like, and I'll turn this off. So yeah, this one I'll do 8-0, which is 1 and 3. Alright, so you kind of have the illusion that it's more complex than it really is. So we've got the kick drum and the hi-hat, and then you could do microtiming on the snare too. I feel like it doesn't have as big of an impact, but it is useful just to put these commands down and kind of experiment with it a little bit. So yeah, these are like very minor adjustments in the timing of it. You know, this is half a tick basically, 4 micro ticks. This one is just 2 micro ticks early. So if you go left on MTT, so it starts at 0, but if you go left, it does negative, so it plays it early basically. The timing is like very minor, but it can have like a sort of more natural sound to it if it's not like perfectly sequenced on the phrase. Okay, so we've got kick, snare, hi-hat, and then I have the sample chops, which I can come back to. Generally, once I have the like basic rhythm section sorted out, and there's probably more rhythm stuff that I want to do, but for now, let me just play around with some different slices. The thing about M8 is you don't really have an easy way to do like expressive performance on it. You know, on the SP404 or other groove boxes, you can kind of like tap the pads as the sample's playing and sort of play something in live. You can do that with M8 if you have a MIDI controller connected to it, but if you're using it by itself, then there's not a way to do that. You have to just put notes in the phrase and kind of like listen to how it sounds, and it's a lot of trial and error, I feel. Yeah, one interesting thing you can do with the sample chops is you can use the pitch command to adjust the pitch of individual slices, which can give you some like interesting melodies. And I think I want the lower pitch to show up like just at the end. So maybe at the end of the 4th bar. So maybe this one I'll do some different stuff on as well. And yeah, it's really important to clone the phrases so that when you're making changes, it's not changing what you had originally put down. So yeah, I brought that decreased pitch back to this like sort of middle triggering the second phrase, and I think it worked out pretty well. Okay, so we've got a basic groove going with the sample chops and then the rhythm section. So generally at this point, I'm considering whether I want to add more to the percussion or if I want to start adding more melodic layers. I think the percussion could use a little bit of extra sounds in it. Specifically, I could add like an open hi-hat, or I could add like a percussion loop, like a shaker or some kind of hand drum or something like that. So yeah, let me see if I can find some extra rhythm sections to add before moving on to the melodics. So yeah, just playing the sample along with the sequence to get a feel for how it sounds, which helps me pick the right pitch. So I pitched it down to semitones, and I also decreased the volume using the dry parameter. And yeah, it's good to audition sounds while the sequence is playing so you can kind of see how everything fits. And you can do that without putting a note in the phrase by holding edit and pressing the play button. So just a good trick for kind of like hearing how things sound in sort of a live context. All right, so let's go ahead and add this note to the phrase for the hi-hat. So yeah, I think I want it on step A, but before I do that, I will clone this. And then we can put it on step A. And then as far as getting the timing right on it, I think generally it's going to be in the same area as the other hi-hats, but might be a little bit more delayed. And you can listen to just a specific section by highlighting it. So Shift Option, and then once you have the section you want to loop highlighted, you just press, if you press play, it'll just play this phrase, but I want to hear it with everything else. So I'll press Shift and play. And then now I can adjust the timing to figure out where I want it. So it helps you kind of adjust the velocity and the microtiming. So I think that sounds pretty good, but I do want it to come in a little bit less frequently than that. So I'll put it on the third one, I guess. And then I'll have the non-open hat phrases play. So it basically comes in once every 4 bars, but it'll do it on the 3rd bar first, and then once every 4 bars after that. Okay, so we've got the open hat dialed in. Let's try another percussion sound. Generally, I want to find the right pitch by just, similar to what I did with the sample chops, of just adding notes to the phrase and then having it loop. So put the high pass filter on there to get rid of that kind of like whatever that was, some kind of metallic sound. And then you can also hear how it sounds in kind of a different context by using the start command. So this will adjust the start point of the sample for this specific note in the phrase, and you can add it to each note to have it trigger at different points, which can be really cool for the rhythm section. You can find very interesting like pockets basically by adjusting the start point of the sample. Another cool thing you can do is adjust the start point, so it's not triggering every single time at the same place, but you can add different start points for different notes. Nice. And then, yeah, you can do further sound design stuff on it. I already did the high pass, so let's see what degrade sounds like. So it kind of brings out that metallic sound that I made a little bit quieter with the high pass filter. So we've got the percussion. I think the rhythm section is sounding pretty good. So now we can move on to more melodics. And generally what I'm thinking about at this point is whether I need to add bass, or if there's already bass in the sample, whether I can just use that. So there's a bass in the sample that I'm using. So I think we might be able to just amplify what we've got here. So let me see if maybe I can do that with the EQ perhaps. So yeah, there are two kind of tricks that you can use to amp up the bass in the sample. So one of them is using a high pass filter and then really jacking up the resonance and choosing a cutoff that kind of amplifies a certain element of the low end that's easy to hear. And then the other way is to use the EQ, which I did earlier. They work well together, or you can use them separate. Kind of depends on your sample and like what sounds are in there. Okay, so at this point, after I've got the bass situated, I try to add more melodic layers, and it's good to think about like what sounds are already in the sample for two reasons. The first reason is you can either choose to add sounds that are different than what's already in the sample to kind of like create a new arrangement or add different elements. Or if there are things that are already in the sample and you want to play along with them or add different elements using the same instrument, you could do that too. So let's think about what's in the sample. So there's definitely the bass because we just added that or amped it up. There's an E piano that's adding a simple melodic progression. There's that electric guitar. There's definitely space for like maybe a horn or a flute, maybe a regular piano, strings maybe. So yeah, a lot of different options, but just something to think about when you're adding layers is what's already in there and what can I add that interacts with those sounds, whether it's something totally different or it's something that's the same. So yeah, let's try and add some different sounds now that we've thought about what's in the sample. Yeah, again, kind of the trial and error approach, add notes and see what works as far as pitch goes and where you want the timing of things. So right now I have things starting on like step 4, which is where the snare comes in. Alright, so that's kind of a low flute layer. It's not too bad. It doesn't add too much, but it's there in the background and can kind of come forward if I want to mute the main sample chops. So yeah, just a nice little layer to build things up. Let's see what else we got. Not quite sure if it's in key, but maybe it is. I don't know. Sounds like it kind of matches the vibe. So yeah, with this one, I could add slice markers, but I'm not gonna. I think I'll probably just use the start command to trigger the sample at different points. If you feel like the sounds are kind of competing with one another, the filter can be a good way to control the sound and keep it in a certain frequency range. So bandpass is generally very good for that, and the high pass as well if you feel like the low end is kind of clashing with what you've got in the low end already. So yeah, it seems like bandpass gives it a little bit more of a specific place to be in the arrangement, which is good. All right, so we've got the horn layer, it doesn't sound too bad. And then we've got one more slot here. So let's do one more melodic sample. So what do we want to do next? This piano is very interesting. It has this like kind of chime bell tree type thing at the end of it. Although that's going to be tricky to work with because it kind of just cuts off abruptly. So I'll have to use an envelope probably to control the release of it so it kind of fades out naturally. Or you could do ping pong looping to have it play backwards and forwards. Although this has its own kind of challenges because if you put a note like this in the phrase, it just plays forever until it hits another note in the phrase. So you can use a kill command or an off command to shut it down, but easier than that is probably just to use the envelope. So yeah, let's set that up. Seems like around step 6 or 7 is when it comes back to the beginning of the sample after it ping pongs and plays the piano backwards. So we could have the hold be for, so one phrase and then like, let's say, I guess we'll do 4 steps. What does this sound like? Oh yeah, and then you just want it to fade out after that point. So yeah, and then this is how long it takes to fade out. So we'll have it play the full phrase, and then once it gets to the second phrase is when it'll start to fade out. And it'll fade out over the course of 5 steps, which is below the 7 that I noted earlier. So that sounds okay. Maybe I could do it a little bit longer. Yeah, maybe it'll sound a little more natural, like actually in the arrangement. It's like 2 notes or 2 chords or whatever. I think I'll use the start command to have it just play one of them. So the way that I have the melodic arrangement is the pitch goes down in the last bar, both with the sample chops and the horn plays lower notes. So I think I'll try pitching this down and see what it sounds like. Alright, so the arrangement sounds pretty decent. So at this point, there's some like kind of final mix stuff that I think about as far as once all the layers are added, and then some sequencing stuff as well. So let's start with the sequencing stuff. So basically, I want to make sure that each of the chains has the same number of phrases in them so that the playhead moves equally through each of the chains that I set up in the song page. So if you have some that have 4 and then others that have 2, basically this one will play twice as fast because, or not twice as fast, but it'll go through it twice as many times. So I'm going to make sure they all have 4. Yep, okay, so they all have 4. So now as they play through, they'll move through at the same rate. Then the next thing I want to do is bring in certain layers at different points in the playback. So I need to have a phrase that's basically empty. So I'll use 0, 0 for that. And this will have 4 zeros in it. And basically what I'll use this for is as a placeholder to have the sequence continue to play through these tracks, but to have it not play any of the chains that I created. So this is just going to be this, like, I guess I could get rid of the flute too. So this is just the sample chops and then the rhythm section. Nothing else. And then the low flute comes in. Piano and the bell tree chime thing. It's kind of just looping at that point. I don't really need it to play a certain number of times. The only other thing to set up here is once this plays through, it might continue to trigger once it gets to 0, 0. So let's see what that sounds like. Sometimes you have to put like a mute off command in your blank phrase to kill sounds that are kind of just like running away or playing if you don't intend them to play. So let's start this from the second to last phrase and see what it sounds like. So you can hear the low flute is playing through. So yeah, I probably will just kill it. Maybe I'll just put an off command on step 8. So let's see what that sounds like. So So it kind of just abruptly cuts off the low flute, which doesn't really sound great. Another thing you can do is you can use the volume commands and kind of fade it out with this, bring the volume down, and then you can use the rep commands. Maybe every single tick it's bringing it down, or it's doing whatever it says here. So -25. So basically it's like decrease the volume by 16, and then once it hits this, it just decreases it by 0.25 every tick. Let's see what that sounds like. I don't know, it didn't really seem like it adjusted the volume at all. Maybe you just have to like keep repping it. What does that do? So that did kind of fade it out. I guess that sounds better, but it's, I don't know, I feel like I should know more about how to do this, but I don't. So that's how to fade it out. So some other stuff to think about towards the end of the arrangement. So I've got it kind of sequenced in the way I want, where different layers are coming in at different points. Some other final sound design type stuff is like increasing or decreasing levels if things sound too loud or too quiet. I was kind of doing that as I went, so there's probably not too much more to do there. I could set up like a side chain for the kick. I mean, I could have it duck like all the melodic stuff, but let's try having it duck the sample chops first and then see how difficult it would be to do that for everything else. The way to set it up is you go to the sample chops or whatever you want to be decreased. So in this case, I want the sample chops to get quieter when the kick drum plays. Then you do the trig envelope. Destination is volume. And then the amount basically lets you control what happens to the volume once the trigger happens. So I want it to decrease. So I'll do it 0, 0. So it's like basically ducking it. This will mute it out. So this is just to see what it sounds like. And then I adjust it further after that. And the source should be the kick drum. So when the kick plays, the sample chops get super quiet. And then you can use the hold to make it stay quiet before it starts to fade back up to its regular volume. So obviously that's like way too pronounced. So yeah, duck it by a certain amount of volume, keep it at that volume, and then decay controls how quickly it kind of gets back to the regular volume. So 40 is fine. And then I could do that with all the other melodic samples too. I'll do it with the horn too, because that's the only other sample that kind of like plays through. I wonder if I can copy the modulator from the sample chops. Let's try that. So I'm at the sample chops, shift option to copy. Then you do the horn sample. That's what I want to duck. Whoops. And then shift edit to paste. Wow. Very convenient. So it's already got the kick as the target, and it's holding it in the same way it was holding the sample chops. What does this sound like? All right, so now the kick is like a lot more forward because the sidechain creates space for it by decreasing the volume of some of the more persistent sounds. As far as other mix stuff goes, the only other thing I can think of that's pretty fun to use is the OTT compressor. So this can be good to add to kind of like increase some of the textures basically, because it'll amplify like certain sounds depending on like different frequency ranges that get like amplified. So let's try that. And usually what I do with this is I really crank it up and I add like a ton of it and then I sort of dial it back. So let's listen and see what it sounds like. And that's about it for my full workflow. But if you want to see more content like this, try to catch me live or check out the live stream replays, because the lives are always a vibe. And that does it for this one. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.